after that, I felt like my manager, she ain't mess with me no more after that. It was pretty obvious. Actually take my lunch to my car, and I was eating my lunch in my car, yes. And I just cried like the whole car ride home. Hi, welcome if it's your first time here, and welcome back if you're returning. This is Case by Case, and my name is Casey. And this is part 2 to 2023 was the worst year of my life. My plan is to wrap it up in this video. Hopefully I can finish it in part 2. If not, there will be a part 3. I feel like I covered so much in part 1. And if you haven't seen part 1, please go back and watch part 1. I'll have it linked below. I share a lot of like the prelude information. And if you have any questions about part 2, it's probably going to be in part 1. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. So like I said in part 1, so from fall of 2022 to fall of 2023 is what I consider like that year point that was like the worst year of my life. So at this point, I had just got a new job. I had quit working at the call center. I hated the call center. I was there for like a month and a half, maybe 2 months. It was just like such a childish work experience. And so I was looking really hard for something new. And so I was super happy to be starting at this job. This was a job downtown Chicago. So I would say, you know, in part 1 I said the tech startup was like my first big girl job. I would say that this job was like my first real experience like in corporate America. Even though this job still had like real janky ways about it as well, this was still like my first experience in corporate America. So I had initially interviewed for the admin recruitment team, but when I was interviewing, the person who was interviewing me said, "Oh, I see you have IT experience and we have a brand new IT recruitment team. Would you be interested in that?" Hindsight 2020, I should have said, "No, I want to stick with admin team." But I was like, "Yeah, sure." I was just so thirsty to be starting somewhere and doing something. And so I said, "Yeah, sure." And so another manager came in. She was the manager for the IT team. It was a brand new team. It was only 2 members on that team. And she interviewed me, and this should have been a red flag right here. The only interview question she had for me was, "Do you enjoy singing karaoke?" And if you do, what's your favorite karaoke song? I don't even remember what I said, but yeah, I said, yeah, I enjoy singing karaoke. And I told her my favorite karaoke song. And she was like, "Cool, you're in. That's it." And I had got the job like that. That should have been my first red flag. But again, this was my first time working in like corporate. I was green. I was very green. And of course, they asked me when could I start, and I said I could start right away. And so I started the next day, which is also a red flag. If they ask you to start right away and then their version of right away is like the next day, that's a red flag. In the beginning, I was just like super excited to be working there. I would get there like half an hour to an hour early every day. Sometimes the door wouldn't even be unlocked. I'd be there so early. Oh, I was just so excited. But I came in the next day, as we discussed, and I pretty much got all my things set up, you know, IT set up and all that. And then they had like virtual trainings, which was different, but I guess I liked it. It was like with their other team that was like located somewhere else, and they had like outsourced trainings. So that was different. And then they would just fill your calendar up with like a week's worth of trainings. And in these trainings, you're just basically going over like the fundamentals of recruitment. We were doing like mock recruitment styles, like someone would be the recruiter on the phone and the other person would be the person being recruited. So it was interesting for sure. So after that first week of training, I joined the team and I was a part of the regular day-to-day tasks and things. And one thing that we did all the time was a 8 a.m. meeting. Every morning we would do an 8 a.m. meeting and we would run through the top jobs that need to be filled, and then our progress as far as recruitees for those positions. As an introvert, I absolutely hated these meetings. So my manager would always start and she would talk about what's priority or whatever. And then she would start talking about her life and she would talk about her weekend and things like that. And to me, it was like she was just talking to be talking. Like, the meetings were so unnecessary to me. Like, we could do like one meeting a week or maybe even two at most. But to me, every morning at 8 a.m. in the morning to talk about nothing, it was so unnecessary. And then she would always be off topic, like things not even related to the job. So it was like a struggle for me to join those meetings. But I think I faked it well, but I don't know. I be thinking I'm faking it well, but then my face be saying something different. Obnoxious. And that was another thing with the job. Like, I tried really hard. I think she liked me. She acted like she liked me anyways, but she was obnoxious to me. And then they would ask you about your personal life and how was your weekend and stuff like that. It was definitely one of those companies where it's like, we're a family. Like, we're a family. We do things as a family. We care about you. But it's like fake, it's very disingenuous. They say they're a family, but you could tell that they're, not. It's just talk. Again, I felt like with this job, it was like a lot of talk. And this was really like an introduction into like the corporate world. I've noticed as I worked more corporate jobs, it's very like disingenuous and fake and a lot of like games they play. They say one thing, but in reality, they do like another thing. And it's a lot of like underhandedness with it. And so I feel like I was just being introduced to that. And it was like really hard for me because I'm someone who's very direct and I understand like direct communication. And the mind games don't really, like, it clicks later. I don't realize it until later. That's what's happening. And that's what was happening. And it didn't click for me until later. And also, I take accountability. I was being a little weirdo, especially knowing how they like to be super close and eat lunch together and everything like that. How I was being weird. I was being very anti. So I would actually take my lunch to my car and I was eating my lunch in my car. Yes. And then the biggest thing, I think this is what really like threw it over the edge. Like, it was around time for them to choose like what charity they want to contribute to for Thanksgiving. So this was closer to October. I had started in September. This is closer to October. And they wanted us to throw out names and charities. They donate cash, but then they also do like physical help, like soup kitchens and things like that. And they wanted us to nominate charities. And so this particular time, they were doing tacos. They bought us tacos and everything. And I didn't eat any of the tacos. I had brought my own lunch and I took my lunch to my car. And then I got a call from my manager. She called my personal number And she was like, hey, where are you? I was like, oh, I'm on lunch. She was like, you didn't eat any of the tacos? I was like, no, my stomach is feeling a little funny. So I'm just sticking with like soup, and I'm eating soup on my lunch break. She was like, oh, I wanted you to come in because we had chose your charity to contribute to this year for Thanksgiving. We wanted to give you a shout out or whatever. I was like, oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'll be there shortly. And so I hurried up and ate my lunch in my car, and then I packed up my lunch and I went back to the office. And then I came in on the end. They were like in a whole round circle and everything. They were having like a whole meeting. I'm like, if you're gonna have a meeting, you know, announce the meeting and I'll stay for the meeting. But don't have like no impromptu meeting, you know? And again, that's because they like to eat their lunch together or whatever. But I'm like, I don't like y'all like that. I don't want to eat my lunch with y'all. And so, I came in on the tail end of the meeting, and they gave me a little clap around or whatever. But then, like, I also got like these like bad vibes from like my manager. Like, she was like side-eyeing me or whatever because I wasn't there. But it's like, it's my lunch break. I can leave campus if I want to. Not campus. I can leave the office if I want to for my lunch break. I could eat my lunch wherever. And that was the other thing. The lunch was only 30 minutes, so. And so after that, I felt like my manager, she ain't mess with me no more after that. It was pretty obvious. And so the next week after this, she started scheduling like one-on-one meetings with each member of the team. So we would do like a weekly check-in, like with just her. And so that should have been my sign right there. I mean, I know now if your manager starts scheduling one-on-one meetings for like how you can improve and things like that, that's a sign that you're on your way out. But me back then with no experience, I didn't know. I was like, oh, okay, she just want to talk to us one-on-one or wherever. And so I probably had maybe like 2 one-on-one meetings with her. So like 2 weeks worth of meetings. And I never really had any notes or anything. So our meetings were always really short. And she never really even talked about anything. She would just say like, is there anything you need help with? Anything that I can do better to support you or whatever like that. It was always questions like that. It was never anything like directly like she felt like I was struggling or anything like that, which I wish she would have just said that I feel like you're struggling or anything, because at this point I hadn't closed on anybody, and this job was basically sales. That's what they don't tell you. Recruitment is basically sales when you work for an agency. Had I known that also in the beginning, I never would have accepted the job. I would have stayed at the call center. But yeah, I hadn't closed on anybody. I got close like a couple times to closing on people, but yeah, no, I didn't close on anybody, and it had been like 2 months at this point. So I should have known that too then, but it was like over my head. And so the final check-in, this was our third one-on-one check-in. It was on a Monday, which was weird because it was usually towards like the end of the week, but she had moved our check-in up to a Monday. I should have known then. But that was like foreshadowing for sure. But I didn't pick up on the hints. I was like so inexperienced. I was so naive. But she moved it up to a Monday, and it was like early in the day. It was like before lunch. And so I came in, I had my notepad and everything, ready to give her some feedback or whatever. And she started talking, and she pretty much was saying, I feel like you don't like working here, which she was right. I didn't like working there. She said, I feel like you don't ask enough questions, and it's pretty much not working out with you, and we have to let you go. And I was like in shock. Like I was taken aback. I was like so confused. I'm like, what do you mean it's not working out? I was so confused. I mean, all the signs were there. I just didn't pick up on it. I was like, I don't know. I was in shock. Like, she was talking, but it was like, I don't know, I wasn't there. I felt like so out of body. And she was just talking. She was like, you're really nice. You're a really sweet person. You really are. But I just don't think that this is for you. I don't think this is the field for you. And that had really hurt. I had never really talked about this before, but I was always the student who like achieved. Like, I never really had to try super hard. I could always just coast. And then when I applied myself, like I excelled, like I overachieved. And so I wouldn't say I was like a teacher's pet or anything like that, but I was always like the quiet, good student. And I had always been praised for being a good student and achieving. And so this was like my first time really like feeling like failure. And so in that moment I was really in disbelief, because I had never experienced like failure like that before. Anything I had ever started and it ended, it was because I had quit it, but it was never because somebody had like ended it for me, you know. I was always on the other end of it. And so to be in the opposite position, it was really hard. I never like, I felt that form of rejection before, and it was really hard. Like, I was just in disbelief. So to go from like the student who got all those accolades and finished college first to being fired from and I didn't even want this job for real. Like, I hated this job. So to go from that to being fired from a job you didn't even like that, it was like a huge knock to my ego. Like, I had never felt that type of rejection before, or I had never like really just like felt like a complete failure before. I had never failed at anything like that. So it was really hard for me to take on, and I didn't know what to do with those feelings. I packed up all my stuff. So after we were done talking, I left the little office room, and she asked me, did I want to finish out the day? I was like, no, I don't want to finish out the day. It's all right, I'm good. So I left the office and I started packing up all my stuff. Of course, it's like before lunch and people notice that you're packing up all your stuff. Everybody's like, Casey, are you okay? What's going on? I was like, I'm fine. It's good. This is actually my last day. And they was like, what? No. And I was like trying to hold back tears. Oh, it was so embarrassing. I was trying to hold back tears. Like, I was like, it's okay. We can stay in touch or whatever. And I was like, it was nice meeting you all, and thank you. And I grabbed my stuff and I left. But that was like so like humiliating, and it was like, and I don't wish that on anybody. This was Monday. I had to go home and tell my parents. Oh, the agony. I had to go home and tell my parents that I had been fired. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It was so humiliating. I was crying. Oh, they let me go. And my parents, they were so encouraging. They were very sweet. And it's like, it's okay. It just wasn't the job for you. They were very encouraging and sweet about it. So at this point, I'm like, I'm laughing, but back then I was crying. Yeah, I was crying. But at this point, I'm like still in shock about everything, and I'm still in disbelief. Of course, I started applying for new jobs and things like that. But I'm feeling really low at this point, and like just dejected at this point, and just feeling like a failure. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just give this to God, because I can't make this better. Like, I can't take this feeling away from me. And I knew that only God could cover, like, those feelings that I had. And so I just gave it to God. And then there was like this special youth service that was happening on Sunday, like after regular service. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to this youth service. I'm gonna encourage myself in God. Like, I'm gonna get these feelings up off me. I'm gonna shout them off. And so I was like excited about service on Sunday. And so I was like asking my brother to go with me and my boyfriend. Well, at this point, he was my fiance by then. I asked him to come with me to the service. And they was like, yeah, we'll go to service with you. And so Sunday comes around and we go to this service. So my fiance at the time, he lived on far west suburbs, and I lived on the south side of Chicago. So he was like an hour away from me. And so my brother and I went to the far west suburbs to go get him, and we all piled into his car. So I left my car out by his house, and we took his car to church. So, and then my church is on like the west side of Chicago. So he doesn't live that far from my church. So we all took his car and we went to service. And service was great. It was super powerful. It was super powerful. Like, I felt very uplifted and encouraged. It was just what I needed at the time. Like, I was weeping in church, but it was great. Like, I felt so much lighter after leaving church. And so after church, we all get in my fiance's car, and then we head back to his house to drop him off and then pick up my car. So we make it back to where I had parked my car, and we don't see my car. If you watched part 1, you remember that I talked about how much I love that car, my first and only car, and how hard I worked to get that car. My car was not where I had parked it. And then my fiance was like, that's weird, circle the block. Maybe it's not, maybe we in the wrong area. I was like, no, this is where I had parked my car. And so I parked his car where I had left my car, and then I got out and started investigating, and sure enough, there was glass like where my car was parked. It was like a whole bunch of like tinted window glass, so it was like black glass shattered all over the ground. I'll insert pictures right here. At this time, if you don't know, the Kia Boys are people who had got famous online for showing how to steal Kia cars, like the older models. Like, I want to say it was between the models between 2006 and 2020. Those models, they have like an issue with the older models, and it was easy to steal because they didn't have an engine immobilizer. And so all the newer Kias have that upgrade. So it was around the time where it had just started, and it was like starting to run rampant, and they had stole my car. My car was stolen. So mind you, I had got fired on Monday, and this is Sunday. This is what? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is 6 days later. So of course I was upset. The first thing we did was we called the police, and we made a police report about my car. And I called my parents, and I let them know that my car had been stolen. And then they said, okay, we're on our way. And they came all the way out to the far west suburbs to come pick me and my brother up and take us back home. By the time they got there, the police were still there, and I was still filing my report. Child, to my mom and dad, and they asked me if I was okay and everything. And then my mom gave me a hug, and I lost it. I was crying. I was weeping. It was like the worst week ever. And then you could see my fiance's face. He looked so he looked so helpless. Like he wished he could help. And I'm sure he probably felt bad because it was like it was on his block that my car was stolen. But it wasn't his fault, you know. Yeah, that was like the last straw for me though. Like, and so me and my brother, we got in the car and we started heading home. And then my parents were talking to me, and I was just like distraught. Like, it was like, it's gonna be okay. God blessed you with that car, and he'll bless you with another one, which is true. I knew it was true, but I was just like so hurt. Like, I felt like I had told them that I felt like I just couldn't handle any more like heartache. I'll never forget that pain that I felt that night. Like, I remember telling him, like, I can't take no more. This is too much. And I just cried, like, the whole car ride home. And then when I got home, I got in bed, and I just cried the whole night. I just felt like such a failure. And I really felt like I was literally starting over from nothing. I was like, I don't have no job. I don't have no car. Like, I felt like everything that I had worked so hard for was like gone. I'm like at ground zero. I'm like, how am I supposed to pay for this car note, this car insurance? And that was the other thing. I had started a business. My business had failed like right before I started this job. I just felt like such a failure. And I felt like it was too much on my shoulders. Like I couldn't bear anymore. Okay, so I took a little break. I knew I would get emotional, but I didn't know I would get that emotional. So I needed a little break. I'll be back to film part 3, and I'll have it posted for next week. Thank you so much if you made it this far. I really appreciate it. Please stay tuned for part 3. Thank you. Bye.